Hey everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Wicked Unscripted, where we have unscripted conversations about some of the most popular reality shows on television. My name is Abigail Adams, and I am your host for this podcast. And joining me, as always, is my good friend Sarah Talks Big Brother. We are here today to have an important conversation about the recent events in the Big Brother house involving Kyle and his comments about the potential Cookout 2.0 and his perceived attempts to start an all white alliance.
Obviously, Abigail and I are white women. We could not possibly begin to truly understand what the POC community goes through on a daily basis and has their entire lives. Um, but with that, we want to give the POC community, specifically within our BB family, our platform and let their voices be heard. So we'd like to read a lot of you wrote into us, and we would just like to read some of those for you today.
Thank you, by the way.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. Um, so our first email is from Christine Hollis. She said, hey, Sarah, I love your TikToks and BB feeds. As a Black woman, I am responding to your request for POC perspectives on unveiling of Kyle's microaggressions and bigotry on last night's live feeds. I believe you have a good perspective on everything that's wrong with what he said, did, and proposed. And I find it hilarious how he spiraled out of control when he found people were discussing his conversations. But yet, Taylor was outright bullied for 4 weeks and was given less deference and protection from production. But I digress. I think it's important to ensure that though we are happy that Kyle is finally being exposed for the comments he made during the game, please do not hold Michael or Brittany as a savior or knight in shining armor who saved us all from his bigotry. They are similarly culpable for having sat on this information to purposely use it when it was an opportune time for their game to do so. You cannot be an ally or anti-racist and allow racist shit to happen or continue in your presence for even 1 second. I am almost just as sickened by Michael and Brittany's behavior as I am Kyle in the way that they knew this behavior information existed. But rather than address it immediately, they used it as currency for their future safety in the game. So the further conversation in all of this, if racism and bigotry is wrong, it should not be tolerated. It should be eliminated. The moment it is unveiled and not used for a pawn for opportunistic gain. If we were going to talk about Kyle and his actions, which were horrible, we cannot applaud or overlook Michael and Brittany for theirs. Thank you, and I look forward to listening to your podcast later tonight. I do want to start this off with making it very clear that I do not I do not think Michael and Brittany using this in their game or what their motivations were, I can't really speak to. They should have said something immediately. We talked about that in
Mhm.
depth in our previous coverage of when that actually happened. They did discuss it between the two of them. And later, Brittany did have a conversation with Kyle where she said she was not okay with this and not comfortable with this. Um, the whole situation, just there's so much ick involved.
Mhm.
I don't know of another way to put that. It
Hmm.
is an uncomfortable conversation, but it's an important one. And whether that tanks your game that week or it tanks your game 3 weeks later, something needed to be said. Um, Again, I will always give any house guest the benefit of a doubt where I don't know what situation that they are in or how much time they need to truly process this. Brittany has made comments that we'll discuss later on that kind of give us a little bit more insight to that. However,
Mhm.
I absolutely agree. And I for one, will not be citing them as the hero in all of this, even if it means Kyle goes home.
No, I think the only thing I want to give them credit for is speaking up about it in general, but we do want to make sure that's about as far as we're going when it comes to this, at least with our voices, at least in my opinion. This is something that Terrence and Monty, and we will discuss this further in the episode, but this is something that Terrence and Monty actually have been discussing in the house themselves. So I want to make sure if people have not seen what's going on the live feeds, that you guys feel heard, because they not only are you feeling that way, they are feeling the same way as well. Um, while we didn't get to see a supposed house meeting last night, this this topic actually allegedly came up. So I think it's incredibly important to note that, like, in this actually, and I believe it came up from Terrence. So I just think it's something that I want to make sure that people know, like, you are not feeling alone in feeling like that, because there are, especially POC in the house, people of color in the house, who are feeling how you are feeling.
I think when I look back on it, like my gut instinct, well, first of all, I would not be able to keep my fucking mouth shut about it.
No.
Kyle would see it on my face before he even finished the sentence out of his mouth. Um, he would see it all over my face. There would be no way for me to hide it, but that's also why I'm not on the show.
Right.
I also don't want this to sound in any way, shape, or form like an excuse or anything, but I honestly don't know if there ever would have been a good time or a good way to go about this. Um, if they had said something to him in the immediate, which in the first time he said it, I think they were trying to, like, did he really just say? Because we'll quote it later, and
Yes,
it
we will.
might not have clicked immediately, like in that very first conversation. But when he brought it up again, that is when Brittany said something to him about it. I try to look back at this, and do feel like they were like, if we talk about this more, is it going to ruin his, like, does he know this, does he, and I think that they were having this struggle, which I think, you know this game is such we talk about it all the time. It's supposed to be like this microscope. It's supposed to be a reflection and a mirror of a sampling of today's society,
Hmm.
which is also another reason it's so unfortunate that CBS is refusing to air a lot of these things, because it,
Absolutely.
it could reach so many more people that need to hear these conversations, people that want to be educated and know, like, what should you do in that situation? Should you bring it up? Do you have a right to talk about it? Do you just walk away? Do you stand up to it? And added on to that, they're on a show and all these people are watching and it's being live streamed, and I don't know that I would have even known. And that's on me too. This has been a learning experience for me, because although my
Likewise.
gut would tell me to, like, rip him a new one, you when you're in that situation too, like, ripping him a new one, is that bringing, like, how do I educate him in a way that Twitter isn't going to just explode with and ruin his life in a moment of learning and teaching. So I'm not making excuses, and I do
No.
not think it was okay. I just don't know, other than picking up on what he was putting down immediately and saying something, if there would have ever been a better moment. I think part of me feels like they, and Michael talked on this some, that waiting until they weren't on the block and they weren't at jeopardy, which until now, that that could really show, like, I don't have a motive to do this, but on the other hand, they're safe too, so they can say whatever they want. So it's either when you're on the block or when you're safe, and there's no,
I don't think there's a winning situation for anyone here, and I think at the end of the day there's no winning situation, because this isn't a winning topic.
yeah,
There is no way anybody wins here, and I think what happened here is BB Brain, as you like to bring up, really, and I don't mean this in like trying to drag them, but also I am criticizing them, as I do think that their BB Brain clouded the way they handled this
yeah.
situation. Um
Because again, and even Kyle and his statements, I do not think Kyle is a bad person. I do not think he is an evil man. Um, I think he lacks a lot of maturity and he's very ignorant. And
Incredibly ignorant.
I think that while none of these things are excuses, I think Brittany and Michael are lovely people. Um, I do not think that this should ruin their life, and I don't think that it will. But I think that they're all, including us, are going to learn a lot from this. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what's most important. And again, why I keep harping on, like, this should be aired, this should be talked about. That's why we're doing this episode.
Mm-hmm.
important to talk about and not try to pretend it didn't happen. That's waspy energy right there,
No,
And
absolutely. And I think one of the things that I want to bring up, especially early in this episode, because I had an exchange on Twitter, I hope, or not Twitter, on TikTok, and I actually hope that person is listening because it ended, it started a little testy because we weren't quite understanding each other through TikTok and their
hmm
limited TikTok comments, and we eventually came to an understanding about why. So I made a comment and I want to clarify, especially on here, what I was trying to insinuate, and this is not an apology, this is just clarification, because I also think it brings really really good context into this whole debate. So I made a comment, simply just talking about how Turner was pretty quick, that was very much my wording, pretty quick to say that he was going to put Kyle on the block. Now, it was not immediate. That is why I chose specifically the wording pretty quick. I actually refilmed the video, and I'm not trying to get defensive. I refilmed the video a couple times because I did actually say immediately, and I was like, no, 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 it wasn't immediate. He was fighting it, not necessarily hard, but he was saying that Taylor was equally as bad for his game in as part of the initial conversation. Michael was like, no, like, this is why this is worse, blah 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 blah. You have to think about how this situation's also going to impact your game. And so somebody who was talking to me did not agree with my phrasing of pretty quick, and they were like, no, it took time for Turner to figure that out. But this was also a person of color. This is not, I'm a white woman, and so I think it's really important to look at the perspective of how what we define as fast, because in if this was Monty, and I'm not saying like obviously Kyle never would have proposed anything to Monty like this, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying, if this, like, if Monty for some reason was like listening behind the door and heard everything, probably in Monty's mind this would have gone off a lot faster than it was
It
in
would have been a
Michael and
gut
Brittany's.
instinct. It would have been
So
instinctual. Yeah.
that's really where I think, like, this is where things got messy for a lot of people, is because it wasn't the instant thought that Michael and Brittany had. It would have been different. Like, this is why, and I get goosebumps talking about it, because it's not easy to open up about your own biases, and like, even though you address your own biases, you have to admit and acknowledge when they are still existent, and it doesn't even mean that you mean them like with malice,
hmm
because even just me saying pretty quick came off to other people, and I understandably so why they were like, that was not quick, he had to be talked into it. So I think that's a really important thing to remember moving forward with this whole conversation, is how the white individuals in the house are perceiving this versus how all of the people of color in the house are
hmm
seeing this. I just think it's important for us to remember to discuss, and if we forget about it or for some reason it gets missed, we always want to discuss it and be not called out on it, but called in. We want to be able to really have this conversation and like open up about this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I have another email. Our next one is from Linda Hart.
Thank you.
She says, as one of the old heads that follow both of your TikTok pages, and because the two of you give open and honest assessments, I wanted to reach out to you with my thoughts on this season of BB. Moreover, the entire Kyle situation and his Cookout 2.0 comments. As a black woman slash mother, several instances this season have been triggering. Let's start with the first 2 weeks of BB24 and the unrelenting harassment and bullying of Taylor. I hate the Big Brother show. I binge watched last season strictly for the Cookout, and this season around week 3 after hearing about what CBS slash Paramount was allowing to happen. And yes, I meant to use allow because they could have and should have intervened. Taylor looked like she was on the edge of a mental health crisis, which still hasn't been addressed, but they gave tons of screen time to the perpetrators, even to the point of a man boldly stepping to her, degrading her, and yelling in her face. Not one of the brothers stepped in at this moment to de escalate Daniel or in her defense. And this is a huge talking point in the black community right now, the lack of protection for black women. Alyssa cries and people comfort her and defend her. Brittany cries because she and Michael decided to use the truth of who Kyle is to benefit and then feels bad. And people, Taylor even, comforts her. Heck, Nicole, who was the strongest female personality on the set, starts to spiral, per Daniel, and people got up in arms and comforted her and protected her immediately and boldly. Taylor received crumbs in secrecy for fear of wrath of the house's response if seen with her. It was sheer hypocrisy for me. Her HOH was only a mess because so many others were trying to control it. There, I said it. Others brought her the ideas that were later scoffed at and ragged on privately, and I truthfully believe she went along with so much for acceptance and fear of becoming isolated and a bold target again. This entire season, every single one of those cast members have been disrespectful towards Taylor. All of them. Not only does she does not have a true ally, but she doesn't even have a true confident or safe space outside of an empty room with a camera. As for Kyle, let his truth show. I don't have an issue with him as a human being, but too many racial conversations have been had with him as the leader. It goes deeper than him lying about the POCs in the game joining forces. It was his intent. I believe strongly that the intent was for a non POC to closely scrutinize the black folk and villainize them, period. Create strife when there was none. And I am not impressed with Michael and Brittany spilling the beans now. They should have immediately expressed both of their disdain for the hinted suggestion and character by standing up to Kyle and telling him in the moment he was wrong and going to tell the other house guests then. Oddly enough, Brittany and Kyle have also spoken to their own contempt for Taylor, Monty, Joseph, and Jasmine too. I don't see myself watching the feeds or shows throughout the remainder of the season. It's stressful, triggering, and just reading people's posts and hearing comments, I know that many don't see the big deal with what Kyle said, how Taylor specifically has been treated, and that Monty being a black man is his number one threat in their minds, or why I, as a black woman, feel both sickened and saddened by all of it. It mirrors my daily human experience. Oh, thank
I know.
Thank you for reading all of this and allowing me to express my thoughts. Tag me when you go live, Linda Hart.
We have to that's probably one of the most emotional things. I know we've been doing this a very short time, but that has got to be one of the most emotional emails we've ever received. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for trusting us with our and trusting this platform to get your message out, because that is a very, very powerful message. I know you're very emotional. It's okay. You know, it's not
No,
okay.
I'm
I
a
mean, it's
Capricorn. It's
okay
not
to
okay.
feel. It's okay to feel the emotions. It's not okay. This situation's not okay. Of course it's not.
um,
Tell me what you're
thank
thinking
you.
if you
Thank
can.
you, Linda. Thank you for sharing that with us. Um, I I cannot say that I cannot say that I truly understand. Um, I cannot say that I will. I know I can never truly understand um, what that is like, and not just on the show, but in life. Um, I can tell you that I feel your anger. I feel your disdain. I feel your frustration, and I am still covering the show and doing what I do because I want to make sure that people like you are heard, and that CBS, Paramount, MTV, whoever decides to do or air something like this and put people in this kind of situation can hear voices like yours and make change, because this show has such an incredible fan base and a large group of people that are watching. You have so many viewers that CBS Paramount has an obligation to
Yes.
show these things. And if you are going to air what you call a social experiment, you are obligated to air all of it, even the ugly, because it's from that that we're going to grow and learn from, and nothing else. Not styrofoam stacking and pretending all is okay and that Terrence is a fucking mastermind.
Though I will say some of the stuff, and I'm not saying this to like take at your comment. Like, I will say he has impressed me with a lot of the things that
Well,
he
no,
has
I'm referring
said.
to their edit
Of
as to
course, right.
why things happened last week
But
that
that's what I was
happened.
gonna say is
Yeah.
like they paint him in one way, but it's like but there is, and even though we have criticized him for certain comments that we do not agree with, there are times where it's like let's not paint someone in this perspective if like I want things to be accurate. Like I just it's not saying like don't paint if he's a mastermind, paint him as a mastermind, but like let's just paint things accurately and not just for the storyline that CBS wants to tell. Now, I think this is really important to talk about because you and I from day one have been calling out the microaggressions,
Mhm.
talking about how though we would like for people to have a second to step back and learn while it's not okay, um and they avoided it the entire time that Paloma was
They
in the
being
house.
production. Yeah.
They being production, yes. Production completely avoided the topic when Paloma was in the house. The only reason even some of the bullying stuff came out was because of the fight that happened with Daniel between him and Taylor. The only reason we even got Cookout 2.0 comments on the 2 hour in the middle, by the way, I'm going to note that they shoved those comments in the middle of a 2 hour episode where they just tossed a ton of fluff around and around
Mhm.
both. Around that, on both sides of that segment, there were fluff segments that absolutely just made you not think about something serious that you might have heard because it's so easy to distract on shows like that, especially when they don't show the full context and they literally show like 2 seconds and it's like, oh, it was just in passing, la la la, because that's what they made it come off as, where it was just a comment in passing, a couple comments in passing while talking about game. um that it's not the case, and that's why it's important that we call this out and that people, we make sure that not only our voices are heard on this, but that we make sure that people of color have their voices heard on this, because they are clearly not having their voices heard, especially when the only conversation we didn't get to see when it comes to people being told about this was Monty and Taylor. And the only reason Sarah and I believe that we even got the other conversations is because we were up in arms on Twitter about it. Not just us. Twitter went insane over this. Twitter was not having it. Twitter has watched this. This would probably be about the third, or
It
probably
made
not, third
international
major
news.
instance. Yes, international news. It's it's we have to call things out. We have to call out bullshit for bullshit. I'm not, honestly, I've been trying to be nice, and I'm gonna be nice with lots of comments. I'm gonna not censor any more expletives moving forward. No, we're gonna call bullshit for bullshit. And this is honestly how the edit has gone right now, has been some bullshit, and I am incredibly curious to see how CBS is going to do Wednesday's episode in particular, because this all came out immediately after Michael won veto. So it's going to probably be a very early veto competition on Wednesday, in my opinion. And then this whole segment just, they probably wanted to use slip and slide to fill a lot of space. And if they do, they do. But then they're going to have to talk about it on Thursday. And if they don't, we will be right back here to call them out.
Yeah. I mean, there's absolutely no avoiding it at this point.
No,
Um, I have no idea how they would even begin to fabricate a different story.
no, I don't
Um,
either.
they are definitely censoring the house guests and keeping the house guests from discussing it. There was a house meeting today um, about it, and they are not allowed to talk about it, which has never happened to my knowledge in Big Brother history.
Mine
Um,
either.
typically, we see the house meetings happen on the feeds. If they cut it, they cut it. It might get heated, but they at least talk about it afterward. And I don't know what they're going to do with this. And
That in
I
itself is
honestly have
disappointing
zero
too.
trust that they're going to do the right thing.
I am not usually one to say this, but I think it's going to be, and I know we have lots more to talk about, but I do think it's going to be time for us to stand up as a fan base and demand that we have change, not just in casting, but in production. It has to change. I don't even
Yeah.
want to, I don't even want to hesitate. Something has to change. Whoever is in charge should not be in charge anymore. I am sorry. And I don't mean that maliciously. I am saying this is
Rodner.
enough. This is enough. This is not even the first season that we've had to deal with this. And this was dealt you can correct me. I feel like that we got to handle a lot more better with season 15 than right now with certain comments that are being showed on the feeds. Of course, it's been a decade, so I can't quite remember how the feeds went down. So I want to make that, but it just, I am so sick time after time after time. Not even just us as two white women, people of color are screaming, please don't let this be condoned. Call this out, and they won't do it, or they will hide from it. They'll water it down. Enough with the watering down. That's all I'm going to say on this topic because we have so much more to say.
Yeah.
So much more.
Our next email is from Bree Brown. I've been following your BB coverage since last year. I've been enjoying you and Abigail's coverage for this season. Thank you. I want to
Yay.
share my input. My username is Aubrey Brown on TikTok and Twitter for verification purposes. I've always been mainstream watcher of BB, but the last few seasons, I've been invested into live feeds because you can truly see players' true, authentic colors. As far as the Kyle comments, yes, the comments that were made by him are alluded, but I think that he is aware of what he is saying and felt comfortable saying it to Alyssa, Michael, and Brittany. He's on 24/7 surveillance and mic'd, which I will get into in my CBS protecting him stuff. Kyle has had a conversation with Alyssa. Michael and Brittany don't have, and she's quoting here, Michael and Brittany don't have a close relationship with Monty, Joseph, Taylor, and Terrence. They're going to realize that that group can be dangerous. Then they'll start to align with, like me, you, Turner. His conversation with Michael and Brittany was those six people with that background, and then inaudible, fear of Cookout happening again. Kyle's comments gives off that he doesn't trust any person of color in the house, and this let's make Big Brother great again. It's problematic for a white cis male to be accustomed to a reality show that typically favors his kind, and even if they didn't win, they always had control of the house the majority of the season. It's more alarming that no one has called him out on it until yesterday. As far as Michael and Brittany exposed Kyle comments, they both discussed the stuff Kyle said weeks ago, wanting to team up with him, and their response to that was to have a POC in the alliance so they didn't come off racist, which that is problematic as well. I understand this is a game, and I just think that you wouldn't want to align yourself with someone with such hateful views. Yesterday, Michael and Brittany decided to tell the house that Kyle wanted to create an all white alliance, but they wanted to emphasize that this was not a move for their game. You two were fully aware of what this man had said for weeks and sat on that information. Michael's arguably one of the best BB players, but this was a huge mistake that he had made. This was by no means a gift to the house to expose him. It created a lot of sadness and chaos. They weaponized this information for their benefit to get to a final two on the backs of those POC house guests who were affected by the racism. And lastly, CBS hiding these comments. The Cookout was an amazing alliance, and I'm so happy to have seen it beautifully done and bring awareness of the prejudice. But it has created paranoia among white people, not only in the house, but also production. This season has shown people be even more hateful towards black women and POC in general, which is why I believe none of what has happened on the live feeds are shown. This goes back to week 1-2 with the bullying of Taylor. CBS, Paramount, Viacom, this behavior has been embedded into the Big Brother and Cookout happened last season out of the frustration and anxiety that has happened because of them allowing it. I know that was a lot, Aubrey. Aubrey,
That's
thank you
not a
so
lot.
much.
That was perfect. We really appreciate people sending us such thoughtful emails. Like it really means a lot because this is really, we want you guys, again, we want you guys to be heard, and it's so important to get perspectives that aren't just from white women and just, it's great. And I really want to also touch on again, just it is important to call out CBS, and I like that she literally was very direct. No,
The
I love
Capricorn
it.
and me have really appreciated the segments.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Oh,
Love the
literally
breakdown.
loved it. Oh, it's perfect. And also, like, amazing that like you got the comments because we were going to bring those up too. So it's like great that we can add those comments in right now without like going too far off so
Yeah.
people can know too. So just all around great email. Thank you for reaching out and um
But I do want to use her email to as a launch. Um, the most and I've made I don't know how many TikToks about it. You and I've shared screenshots of
yeah.
comments. I've gone back and forth with people in my comments. Kyle wanting to start an all white alliance and being scared of the people of color is not the same thing
No.
as the cookout. It comes down, let's talk about,
Mhm.
previous email. We're talking intent here. The cookout was not an anti white alliance. The cookout was not get out all the white people. The cookout was let's finally have our first black winner in 23 fucking seasons of Big Brother. Let's band together. And a lot of
After
them, they
2
couldn't
decades of the new
stand each
millennium.
other.
Literally. Oh, they couldn't. They were fighting all the time.
They couldn't stand each other, but they knew that this was bigger than them. They knew that by doing this, they were taking a stand and they were telling CBS and Paramount and all future Big Brother players, like, we're here too. And we're not, the first boots anymore. We're not your token black girl anymore. They took a stand against all of that. And it wasn't against the white people, it was
Mm-mm.
for black people. And that is the biggest difference. Kyle forming an all white alliance is not an original gameplay. It
No.
is a 23-year-old, 23 seasoned gameplay, is the reason the cookout did what they did. You can't do what Kyle's doing because of the cookout. No, the cookout did what they did because of every Kyle we've had in every season doing what he did.
Tiffany and Josh were even joking, not joking, but they were commenting like that because I can't remember what she quote tweeted, but Tiffany was just like quote tweeting something, and she was just like, "Yeah, like surprise, like White Alliance first time in 23 seasons," and Josh is just like literally, um,
The
and it's
White
just
Alliance is more common than the first week all girls alliance that we get every season.
no, no, literally. And it's just, it's not, but the thing is, it's not brought up in this way. So this is what we need to clarify is it's not like people get together and they're like, let's start an all white alliance. It is
They
implicit.
just do
It is
because they
the,
look at the black women in the house and the black men in the house are the threat and the black women are the
and they
house
don't relate
are
to them.
they don't relate to them or they're emotional or whatever these implicit biases
Ugh.
they make in their heads.
Aggressive,
The
loud,
aggressive, loud. We saw it.
scary.
They were just more
I hate
vocal about it
scary.
this season, but they've been vocal about it in previous seasons. It's just not fucking aired.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens, and I don't know how many black women can come out of the Big Brother house and say, "This was my experience. This is how they treated me. This is what happened."
How many
And
times?
Taylor makes national news when it happens, and I think it's just cuz our voices are getting louder. The cries are getting bigger. Like CBS is having a harder time covering it up now, but what happened to Taylor is tragic and heartbreaking, but it's not new.
And it's also their own fault for putting on a person who, and I don't mean this in a totally malicious way, but putting on a person who like and they're like this is our TikToker, and then like having him be the person that really is screwing everything up, and then people like us being on TikTok, and not just us, there's tons of people on
Yeah.
TikTok, and we are all calling them out, and they have a brand new platform that they've never had to deal with before, that not only are we able to give like verbal commentary, we can then show the clip. Like
Yeah.
with Twitter,
We
it's
got
a different
receipts.
format, and you can do the same with Twitter. It's just written and then the clip. With this, it's just audio and then the clip instead of just sharing stuff in written form. There is so it just opens up a brand new avenue, um, that I don't think they've even thought about the level of criticism. I don't even know if they know the level of criticism they're facing on there. To be very fair. I know Kyle does because let's be just a note. Well, not Kyle, but his family does because not only has Big Brother been taken out of his bio on TikTok, his management email has been taken out of TikTok as well, probably because that has been getting flooded. Um, it just a lot of it seems like CBS didn't understand the ramifications of like or any ramifications, not of who they picked, but just in general, they don't seem to either think about or care about how not only this kind of a situation where someone is making an all white alliance comment, but then how they just cover it up because it's just a show and we don't want to piss people off. And your comment about where it's like, this is about the world. We don't just hide things. This is literally the social experiment and we're supposed to see
Yeah, I'm
everything.
not watching a sitcom.
No.
I'm
We're not,
watching
this
a
isn't.
reality show that is specifically designed to be a social experiment with voices and people from all over the
Mhm.
country coming together and living together as complete strangers. That's the basis of the show. That's why I'm here for it. And I'm exhausted and I can't even imagine if that's where I'm getting like, I will never understand because if I am
For
feeling
real.
this
For
level
real.
of exhaustion with this production company, you can multiply that by a million to remotely feel just like a sampling of what the POC community feels like.
It's unfathomable for either of us. Like, we can only be, like you said, be as frustrated as we are because we are allies and we want to support the BIPOC community. And, like, but it's not something that we experience. I mean, the pain we saw on Taylor's face at the end of the last episode alone, you didn't even have to see the live feeds. Was enough for me to get choked up and just want to
Yeah.
be like, because also us knowing what was coming. And it's just like, this is like, we've gotten emotional on this podcast, we've gotten emotional together. It's, and I still, again, it's never going to amount to the level of emotions that members of the BIPOC community must be feeling right now. And it's just,
Well,
I'm so
speaking of
sorry that you have to feel that way, or that they have
that's
put you in this position. Not that you
and
have
doesn't that
to, but that you have been put in this position and that they do not care, or showing that they do not care about how you feel. Because that's just wrong to me. Just so wrong.
um okay, so our next email, this is from Darian. Hello, I saw your TikTok this morning, wanted to share my thoughts on what's going on with Kyle and the alleged all white alliance from the point of view as a person of color and why it is so harmful. I cannot speak for all people of color, but it's important to me that I put out my opinions on this. It's important for us to. Thank you for accepting others' points of view when it comes to this topic. The main argument that oh my gosh, I have to increase the font on this. I'm sorry.
She's like, my eyes, my old eyes.
My old eyes. Okay. The main
My eyes.
arguments that what Kyle has pitched is not problematic where the roles were reversed last season and everyone was fine with it. As well as, and he's not saying this, he's saying that this argument is out there. As well as he never said the words all white alliance. The Cookout was an all black alliance that originally did not even include all black members of the House. Hannah Chada was a late addition, which rounded out the alliance. Kyle is afraid of those backgrounds will align and take out the rest of the quote unquote silent majority. This would maybe be valid if all the members of the alliance this season were black. Indy and Joseph are lumped into this alliance because they are POC as well. They, however, do not share the same backgrounds and reasons for being there. One of the main questions is why can't they make an all white alliance? The difference is because the white alliance has been the strongest in America for some time and has been based in racism and hatred. It doesn't even need to be official because it's so ingrained in the people's heads that white is right. A large majority of Big Brother winners, runner ups, and even almost whole cast were white, i.e., Big Brother 17, set in 2015, just 7 years ago. Cast two people of color, Davon and James. It's a miracle that people like us even get cast when it's been handed to white people over this long span of time. It's not even last season the Cookout formed this all black it's not even last season. The Cookout formed this all black alliance to ensure the winner was black because there hasn't been one. So there was a common goal for all, but also was built in trust and unity. It was formed not to ostracize white people, but to stand in solidarity against the structure of America. Unfortunately, that is what we see here. Kyle is so subconsciously sheltered that he has this fear of an alliance that he genuinely can't explain. There's also no base for this alliance that he is suspecting, with numerous examples of the POC and more specifically Black House guests targeting each other. The bullying of Taylor for the first few weeks that included Monty, Terrence, Jasmine, and Amira, and Indy, all people of color. During the Festy Bestie twist, when Monty and Joseph encouraged Terrence to join them because they knew if they were to all sit on the block together, Terrence would leave. As the weeks go on, obviously Monty has joined forces with Taylor, yet Indy, Jasmine, and Terrence are still gunning for Taylor. Kyle has given numerous examples of microaggressions, and the first that comes to mind is calling Monty, Joseph, and Taylor loud and aggressive when they've never been seen raising their voices at anyone. For example, when Kyle explains how Monty, Joseph, and Taylor want Alyssa to go on the block during Taylor's HOH, while Monty, Joseph, and Taylor speak very openly about this, Kyle is still trying to hold back because of what seems his lack of trust, but it stems from his fear of these people becoming angry or explosive, other words he used to describe all three of these house guests. It's easy to see that Kyle's fear is a microcosm of America. There are white people in this country that are truly afraid of the rise up of any minority. It's based in racism because he truly can't imagine a world where that doesn't happen. Michael and Brittany attempted multiple times to tell him they can't really see that happening and they are not comfortable, and he continued to push. Kyle was still comfortable with this all white alliance until he realized that Michael and Brittany were not on board, which is why he brings in Terrence, which Terrence is a whole nother story when it comes to racism slash colorism, but we'll just stick to Kyle. I hope that you found this rhetoric useful and something that can be used for your newest episode. I really appreciate you talking about this. It means a lot to a great group of people.
Well, another great email, gotta say.
I,
Like,
I I mean, that was perfect, perfectly said.
mm-hmm,
And I loved all the examples again, like because again, like I can't tell you how many times right before we started recording this, I got another one about the how is this any different than the cookout, and
mm-hmm,
at this point, like, fuck it, I just want to block people. But the other hand, I want to educate them too. But at what
right.
point are they just beyond that? And they just, the information is out there. If at this point you don't see the difference, is because you're not willing to learn.
Like, there's no other way to put it. It's the information is not just out there from the people who have experienced it. Like, it is people who have watched it, people who have had to watch it multiple times, and it's just like, why are their voices not valid at some point? Like, it's just like to the people who just won't. I think to some extent there are people who don't want to hear it, and no matter what excuse that they're given, they're like, but 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 and it's like, okay, so you're not actually here to have a debate or to actually learn anything, are you? You are just, and I don't mean this as everybody, because there are plenty of people who are confused, and like, especially if you're new to this season and you don't quite understand what the cookout was because you didn't watch last season, that's fine. Like, we want to answer those questions and have those conversations, because at the end of the day it is about education. But there, it just, I mean, to your point, there are just some people that we see, and I can guarantee plenty of people listening have had their own conversations that are similar to this, where they see somebody comment it and they respond, or someone responds on their own stuff on social media where they make a comment like, what this is the same as the cookout and that kind of stuff, and having to have that exhausting conversation. It's exhausting for us. I cannot even imagine again how exhausting that has to be for a person of color to not even just explain it to them, because for us it's like that's just common decency. That is them literally asking for just genuine respect. How goddamn hard is that? How goddamn hard is it to give a human being respect? I don't understand. And I honestly, why a lot of this drives me up a wall, because it comes out of a lack of respect for human beings. And I want to make clear that, like, we're not going to, like, people are going to make mistakes, especially white people, when they are dealing with the situation. And we're not excusing what Michael and Brittany did. We appreciate that they brought it up, but they need to be criticized as well. but not to the like Kyle is on a different level of criticism because his his was all about his actual intent. But it's not to say that Michael and Brittany aren't culpable in this in some way, shape, or form. Um,
I live in a very conservative area. I live in Texas. I spend the majority of my day um, hearing this, fighting this, speaking out against topics like this, um, and trying to educate the ignorant around me. And I think that is why I probably like have a little bit more empathy, because I do. And again, I watch these people on the feeds day in, day out. Kyle has so many red flags, so many red flags.
it's not even
Um,
just with race, guys. It's literally he's a
it's not even.
walking red flag.
It is racism. It is
Walking red flag.
misogyny. It is
Bad.
toxicity. He is emotionally abusive. I mean, he.
Ooh, and that's a hard bold on the emotional abuse part. Like,
It is.
that's a different
There's
conversation for
so
a
many.
different day.
Yeah, I think Michael and Brittany will learn and grow from this and be able to. I think that this um one, yeah, was a tough spot for them, but also I think that they are both aware. And because Brittany said it today in her conversation with Terrence, that in looking back, she wishes she wouldn't have known what she knew now. And I don't know the exact phrasing, but she has alluded to like, I wish I would have handled it differently then.
That was
And I
almost not
feel like,
exactly what she said, but that's a great paraphrase. Yes.
yeah, I wish I would have handled it differently in that moment. Um, I thought I was doing the right thing, but now in hindsight, I can see where it wasn't. Um, and she said that like that was a reflection on her and that she was learning from this situation as well. So that's even encouraging because that is extremely hard to do in the
Mm-hmm.
Big Brother house when the only voices or reflections, she can't even go back and watch footage. All the self-reflection is just in her head, in
Mm-hmm.
her memories, and in having conversations with every house guest about this and coming to this herself. So good on her for speaking out, especially in front of the cameras too, because you could tell she didn't. They were kind of speaking in code because they're not supposed to be talking about this shit for some reason because CBS thinks that we're dumbasses, I guess. But um all that to say that I feel hopeful for Michael and Brittany. Um
Likewise.
and I don't think this is cancel worthy, but I think it is educational for them.
Oh, for sure. And when we get further in the podcast, because we have a whole nother segment, guys, where we're gonna just break down everything. And we wanted to start this because first with this because we
I'm
are.
sorry.
Oh,
I
sorry.
just I need to it but it must be said that because even though I feel those ways about them, I do feel that they are worthy of criticism.
Oh, for sure,
Not
for
worthy of
sure.
canceling or ruining their lives or anything, but worthy of criticism, as are
Absolutely.
everyone in the house, as
Oh,
is
for sure.
everyone in the house.
For sure. And we will talk about like especially Turner, who I'm gonna stand up. Like I know you've been a Michael defender and not like to like not like to no end, but it's just like you've been like talking about like how he might be perceiving comments, and I've been one a big on Turner, but it's really important that we just call them out for what it is because at the end of the day, if we are going to act like we have this platform and we're going to call things out and then we're going to sugarcoat certain things, it's just hypocritical. It's not fun. And does it hurt my heart to say a lot of the things that we're going to have to discuss? Absolutely. The if you thought this first part was tough, and it's been beautiful, though, because of some of the amazing thoughts you have shared. We have a lot to discuss when it comes to how everything breaks down because it's emotional and it's raw. I have a couple of questions on my end to share really quickly. One is from Sarah, not you, Sarah, a different Sarah.
No.
And hers is on production giving out warnings. She's just curious about, and this will kind of tie into the whole how hold on one second. I'll read it and then we'll get into it. She says, "I would love to know your thoughts on production giving people warnings. I've seen a lot of people talking about the warnings, how they feel are a way to protect people who are saying inappropriate things. What are your thoughts, and do you think there's a better way to handle this?" And I want to say, so this question comes because of a discussion we were having. This is actually a little bit, I think this came in a couple days ago, but I thought it was very relevant to our conversation because uh, part of the reason that Brittany had the conversation, we allegedly, we believe that part of the reason that the conversation between Brittany and Kyle about the optics of the alliance was because one of the three of them was tipped off to some degree while discussing something in the diary room. It doesn't sound, I don't believe it was something like they were like, "What do you mean about the all white alliance?" Like, I think it was something like, "What do you think about this versus that?" Because they were kind of talking with Kyle about whether or not they wanted to actually work with the alliance. They didn't really want to, but they didn't want to upset Kyle at the same time, which is where they got into this mess. Um, so I just wanted to bring that up, this specific question, very briefly at least, because whether a warning was given out or not, I think it's interesting to talk about, like, should they even give out warnings? Um, what is their place in the game? Because and like
I go back
should
and forth. I wish that the show
I do too.
wasn't as produced as it is. However, they're gonna do it. Um, so why don't they do it when it benefits Taylor? Why are we doing it when it benefits Kyle?
Yeah, I agree.
I honestly, and you and I've talked to former house guests and stuff. Um, I know that they do it. I know
Oh
that it's
yeah,
pretty vague, and like maybe a line of questioning here and there. That particular conversation, I could absolutely Brittany saying that as like a non-confrontational way to bring it up with Kyle.
could have
Only
been
be-
too.
I could just see it like it's kind of like shifting, like, don't be mad at me. This is just like, and
Please
she could
do
be
not
vague
talk
enough
about
about it.
production.
Yeah, it's yeah. So I don't know, but
I
I
don't even know if
wish
I have a
more
full thought
people.
on
I
this.
don't think that I honestly don't think that the Taylor situation would have stopped had the DR sessions not been as pointed as they were.
Mhm. I don't
It-
disagree.
And if it had gotten much worse, we would be wanting Taylor out of the house, to
Mhm.
get her away from them. Um,
Well, we wanted that for a little bit. Once you once she got
yeah.
the leftovers, we were like, "Well, great. We don't have to worry about her feeling ostracized. Never mind. Never mind.
eh, I mean,
Not intentional, but
don't want them talking about their DRs. That's always been a rule. There's multiple
correct.
reasons for it. Um, but from everything we've heard, like production doesn't. I've never had a house guest say they told me this, they said this.
Right.
It's prompt questions that lead the house guest to believe a certain thing.
Exactly.
Um, I've never heard a house guest outright say like production said, like Kyle said this. How do you, whatever, when Kyle didn't say that thing to the person they're talking to. Like they're
Right.
not like outing conversations.
Right.
Um, I don't
Yeah,
know
I
how the
mean,
therapy sessions though. I don't know how the therapy sessions go.
I agree. I don't know if I had a it's not even that I think I should have a fully formed opinion on everything either. I think with this is one where I feel like
They're going to produce anyway. You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like the production's not going to stop. But I just find it very frustrating that they would try to cover this up and help Kyle
Yeah,
when
I was just going to say.
they let Taylor live in hell for 3+ weeks, three,
They're like,
four
well,
weeks.
entertainment. So I
And
am
it
glad
was
that you
it,
brought
it
that up.
wasn't until she was trending on Twitter
Nope.
that they did anything about it.
Correct. And it was because we were and it's because, like, especially when Big Brother starts, there's all just buzz about Big Brother, so a lot of it got buried behind people all like still catching up on Big Brother's starting, Big Brother's starting. A lot of people weren't really picking up yet on the fact that literally microaggressions were occurring on day 0.
Yeah.
Not even literally
But, like,
technically day
I just wanna
0.
know, I know that we joke that the Julie Chen versus Julie Chen Moonves, but, like,
Oh, we joke, but
ultimately,
we don't.
but Julie's questions, we know they're written by production. Why was Aaron given that energy, but, like,
Mhm.
Pooch wasn't for his microaggressions? Or, you know, like, why did that
Nicole or
stop?
Daniel. Like
Daniel.
the hardest they did, they gave them softballs and people are like, "Yeah, she called him out." I'm like, "Not
No.
not really."
Julie used to step on fucking throats. Not only did she call Aaron out when Aaron's like, "I don't remember I said that." She's like, "Let's roll the footage." And then she, like, played it for her,
I
you
mean,
know? Like,
it's cuz I'm from Texas and like all it's like literally like it's Sarah's Sarah's like never say that. But it's just it is one of those things where
I've already established what it's
again,
like around here.
why I am going to be yeah, I can't even imagine. I live in the conservative part of Massachusetts. I don't even. Well, I guess I live in the liberal part of the conservative part, if that makes sense. Like
There
we're
you
all
go.
liberal, and then on the South Shore is very conservative. But there's this little pocket on the South Shore. It's pretty liberal, and I'm there. So I would. But I grew up. My boyfriend and I very much grew up in not definitely not what the kind of environment you find in Texas, but absolutely not a diverse environment. And so
Yeah.
um a lot of just watching Big Brother for me over the years has been about me addressing my own internal biases. This right here, I was just talking about earlier, about me just talking about the difference between how fast people perceived Turner saying, "I want Kyle on the block," and how much he was actually fighting with it. Like that's it's why I have to look at where I was like that was pretty quick. People are like absolutely not, he had to be talked into it, and it's about perception is reality and how we are going to feel about things, and that's just where I think it's a very dynamic conversation. The last question that I have is from Alyssa, and this is something you and I have already talked about multiple times, and this will be something we probably wrap up with anyways. But the whole discussion moving forward, and especially we want to bring this up before we go through our breakdown, is how should CBS handle what we're about to tell you? Versus how will they? We'll probably pose this again at the end of the episode. Maybe I'll pose that again at the end of the episode anyways. But I want us to at least keep that in mind because I mean right now we already know how we how we want it to do, how it doesn't change,
Show it all.
but it's about what they
I
should
want a
versus
montage.
so we know what they should. I think almost take should out cuz should we know what they
But
should
then they're
show.
gonna have to answer to why we are, like, here 3, 4 weeks later and why we're
Correct.
just now seeing this shit.
Yep. And they're going to have to answer to that whether they like it or not. I don't know um this is part of why we've been criticizing them for weeks about not showing this because it's like guys this is going to come back and bite you in the butt. There's going to be a reason and you haven't shown it and then you're going to look like you're behind. Surprise surprise, guess who was we were right. So definitely I think a little definitely a topic I'll bring up again as we wrap up the episode. But I think I want us going into this timeline discussion because this is going to be quite the conversation. We have a lot to break down for you guys. So much so we cannot get it done in enough time in the next episode because
Yeah.
there's going to be so much fallout from what we're telling you that we're going to need just as much time as we're giving you on this episode to wrap everything up. So, with that, I want to start. I'm just taking a quick note. So, let's start talking about this timeline because there's a lot to break down and it starts early. Not early, but early enough. So I have a couple dates. I really want to make sure that we're very clear about when these comments were first brought up.
Right.
Kyle first made these Cookout 2.0 comments at the very beginning of week 5. That was on, if I am correct, if
And what
unless
week are we
my
on now?
week 8. So we have to put that in context, guys. There has literally been 3 full weeks of game in between when what was said and this whole situation, which is why it's important to talk about the timing of everything. This was short. The comments were brought up shortly after Michael won HOH. If I have the date correctly, it is August 4th. That it was that Thursday, and this was immediately after Nicole's eviction. Actually, I have a one of the last emails, just because it was an easy little tie-in here. Amy asked us to clarify what exactly was said, and I'll love to just read her email just so I can hear her voice, or you guys can hear what she says. She says, "So I don't see the live feeds as a Canadian, so I'm just wondering, were these comments said maliciously, or could it be that Taylor said? Could it be because Taylor said she would never be responsible for voting out another person of color, and he thought a Cookout 2.0 was happening? Or is this just a whole CBS cover up? What's going on? Thanks, ladies, and keep up the great work." So it's just good. Like, there's a ton of questions that we get just like Amy's. So I just wanted to at least read hers, because she was so kind to send that in and ask, because that's not an easy question to ask either, like, especially when you don't know what's going on and you don't want to seem like you're just assuming something that is one way or another without getting your information. So this will be a little bit of a breakdown. So as we mentioned, that is so Kyle's first comments came very beginning of week 5, at the very beginning of August. It is now the very end of August. August is about to end. In this conversation, there were a lot of important points to bring up. One of them being that Kyle pointed to every single person of color in the house, not saying Indy is a person of color, but he also pointed to Indy as well, and suggested that they were all aligned simply because of their quote unquote backgrounds. He also said that his quote unquote biggest fear was that a Cookout 2.0 was forming, which, just to inject a little bit of something we have talked about earlier in this episode, just shows his lack of understanding for what the Cookout was in general. He also mentioned their quote unquote diverse background, and then suggested that they stick together, and they being the white members of the house minus Indy. Here is a full quote from the conversation. "Everyone has those strong whys that all coincide. I look at our alliance, meaning the leftovers, and it's like it was great because it was based out of necessity and our backs were against the wall, and that's what brought us together." And that's when he was talking about, I'm worried about the Cookout 2.0 possibly forming, as we just mentioned, and kind of is also using some concerning phrasing. There's more to discuss, but I want to check in with you before I read more comments. Do you have anything to add in there?
Mm-mm.
Do you want me to keep going? I didn't think so.
Nope.
So, a couple other comments that he made, and this is in the about this. This is the same week. Um, because they didn't necessarily say no to the idea right away. And they were kind of entertaining it, not entertaining it because they wanted to be in it, but entertaining it because they didn't really know how to say no. To be very, from how it looked, they didn't know how to say no. And so they just didn't say no.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the other one other really important conversation that I want to have is a but that we want to point out is a conversation that Michael, Turner, and Brittany Turner, excuse me, Michael, Brittany, and Kyle, excuse me, had in one of the back bedrooms. In this conversation, Kyle used the phrase "silent majority." Um, in direct reference to the white members of the leftovers versus the non-white members of the leftovers, and in that same breath was saying that Monty is loud, Joe is loud, and Taylor is loud, which is for anybody who and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, for anyone who does not know, that is an incredibly gross microaggression.
It is.
All of them, I mean, the silent majority, I don't know.
Even if you don't, like, even if you're out there and you don't realize why that's a microaggression, you could look at it as just fucking false too. Like,
Correct.
not even literally, metaphorically, literally, they are not like, this just was pulled out of his ass because of his biases, aka a microaggression.
Now, not to direct people, not this. I don't want this to sound like a self
I
promotion,
want to
but you
give
can
like
see these comments on my TikTok if you need to. I have
we can
posted them there.
we can use this like educational moment, but when I've had these conversations with people in the past, one of them that almost everyone has heard at some point in their life, or has said, or has heard a family member say it or something, a microaggression is something like, she's very well spoken for a black woman. It is an ignorant comment that's not meant to be like an insult, but it is because of your biases that black women cannot be well spoken.
Mhm. And I think that's
Um,
what some people do miss about what microaggressions even are. And I don't mean this, I think sometimes it is genuinely a lack of understanding of what a microaggression is. Um I mean, I being very honest, I went to a liberal arts school and I studied politics, and my uh politics professor would just throw them around like it was no big deal. And when we had people call him out, not just him but other professors who had been called out in person, there was a big protest on campus, big for our campus because it was small, and he just didn't seem to care. And that's all I can think of right now in these last couple weeks, talking about microaggressions, is just that. And my roommate was one of the ones that organized that, and I wish I had done more. It's not that I didn't support it. It's not that I literally, like, I wrote an article about it for my school newspaper, but I should have, maybe I shouldn't have even written the article. Maybe I should have been the person to stand there and be with them, like, and talk
mhm,
about those kinds of things. So it's one of those things where it's like you have to look at where you're at. And I'm not trying to act like I hope this doesn't come off as savior, because if anything I need to learn from that. It's like, but people will throw out microaggressions, and they can be some of the most educated people. And this is a topic, or supposedly educated, and I don't mean that in a mean way, but it's just like, are you actually educated if you are going to be told what microaggressions are, um understand what microaggressions are, and just ignore what microaggressions are? I'm just using my personal case as an example, but I know there are people that you and I have dealt with when we are discussing this that are like, those aren't microaggressions, that's not racist, blah blah blah. And it's like, no, 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 it is. Like, and it doesn't mean that it's intentionally racist. It doesn't mean that they are intending to have this meaning, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because that's the impact and the a lot of times the accidental intent. Not with every microaggression, but with some. So another thing, so not even another thing. So those are really like just the core of the comments that are really, really important for us to get to. Um, we've noted this on other podcasts, but those aren't the only racially problematic comments that he's made. In particular, we've pointed out this one where Turner wore an outfit where he was comparing him to somebody working at the rice paddies in the Philippines. Horrible, absolutely horrible. So like this is not. And then literally
off
later that night he was just like, oh, he looks like a homeless guy that couldn't rub two quarters together or something like that.
and then, like, did an impression
Yep.
of that,
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
begging for change.
Mm-hmm. So this is it should just be like, well, this is something that he was just thinking about, and it was just the cookout that concerned him, and it's not really like he hasn't shown anything. Yes, he has shown plenty of other biases. We've already talked about that he has, but that's another like literal example of him
I'm not
showing a
bailing on
bias
you.
in
I have
others.
to unlock the door. One
Nah,
second.
you're good, no worries. I'll continue going. So because we're already, this is quite a podcast. But yes, so um a lot of this, so Kyle ended up telling this to Michael and Brittany in week 5. A lot of this didn't really get addressed until um week 8, but it started with week 7, not necessarily in terms of the racism being addressed, because that was not touched until a couple days ago, but in terms of this domino effect is really Kyle's own fault, because he's the reason that the leftovers were even outed in the first place, and why he's going against these people who were once his allies. Um but it also kind of makes the situation interesting to think that they would hold on to that information until they were no longer allies, they being Michael and Brittany. So um just to recap, so again, Kyle has outed the leftovers during Dire Fest, and that was genuinely because he was just concerned about going on the block as a pawn. I understand with 5 people left, like he was worried that Turner and Joe were gonna go take the first shot, and he was like, I can't have that. So in a move of panic, that is when he not only tells Alyssa about the leftovers, but that he goes and tells Terrence. All of the chaos that happened last week led to Joe's eviction on this past Thursday. Also on Thursday, Turner won HOH. A lot of people have thoughts about that. We'll get down to all of our thoughts about a lot of these things in our regular episode, but right now we just want to make sure that we're giving you the full timeline of events of what actually happened, and then we'll simultaneously break down our thoughts and what we think and what we
Yeah.
hear. Um,
Gameplay and breakdowns and everything, that is for our BB breakdown episode. This is a
this is
special edition.
so Turner wins HOH on Thursday. That night he's kind of schmoozing a little bit. He kind of doesn't really know how he's feeling, and he's suggesting that he's going to put Alyssa and Terrence up. On Friday, we find out that he actually is playing, and not even find out, he ends up having conversations with both Kyle and Monty, including simultaneously, about the plan to get out, hopefully, to backdoor Michael, and to, as a result, put up Taylor and Brittany because they had realized that they had a bit formed their own threesome within the leftovers. Which I gotta say I thought was interesting because like they were like, oh, they have an alliance when they literally have the pound, and I'm just like, okay. Anyways, but that's neither here nor there with for this conversation. So in that as he puts them on the block, Turner says that he believes that Taylor and Brittany had a final three with Joe. And really, at this point, this is really where everybody in the leftovers who were on the inside of the house at Big Brochella realized that the leftovers have been outed because they had absolutely no idea. This is still not something that they have been told, at least not explicitly. Um, and so this first started with Taylor and Monty having this conversation, and then Monty went to Michael and Brittany, and that is when Michael is like, if this is really how this is going to go, it might be time for me to expose Kyle. So this is a conversation they had pre-veto. So the veto comes and goes. Michael wins. Gets picked at the last second too, but it doesn't really change. I think this was always the plan, was no matter how this went, I don't know if the approach would have changed, but I know no matter what, the plan was going to be outing these comments the following morning, on Sunday. Late Saturday night, so this actually happened late Saturday night too, the veto competition. So right after, Brittany gives Alyssa a warning and is like, look, there's something about Kyle that, quote, crosses a line that impacts the outside of this house. Um, and in subsequent conversations, we have heard Alyssa say like, "I that freaked me out. I had no idea. Now I get what she was hinting at, but I had no clue that it was going to be something
Do you
like
think
this."
you go ahead?
Oh, that was the last part of my sentence. I'm going into Sunday next, so
Do you think that Alyssa? Well, no, you have. You keep going because we haven't even gotten to the expose yet.
yeah, let's. So Sunday is really when shit hit the fan. I mean, shit was hitting the fan anyways with the leftovers breaking up. It hit it even harder on Sunday. The Sunday might have been the most insane day of live feeds I have personally ever watched. I have not watched all, so I'm just saying personally, but I think in like Big Brother history, it's got to be ranked up there. The day started, not starts, but the day started with Michael and Brittany telling Monty and Taylor about these comments. And this is really almost where I want to have a small conversation because this is why we actually ended up getting to see, in my opinion, any of the other conversations about this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because CBS
Oh, for
chose
sure.
not to let us see any single bit of this conversation. They didn't even let us see
So Michael
them
and
get
Brittany,
together in the room together.
Michael and Brittany, and I'm trying. I'm sorry, I keep fidgeting, but I'm trying to get my foot comfortable.
Oh, no, you're fine. I know your foot's hurt, so don't worry.
um, so Michael and Brittany did acknowledge on the feeds like this was a conversation that they weren't going to have with anyone if they didn't have Monty and Taylor's blessing. And and this was a conversation they wanted to have with them absolutely first, and then ask what their approach should be on it.
Yes.
Um, we didn't get to see any of this. We were rioting. Twitter went insane.
Yeah.
This conversation hit both of them in very different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I want to really talk about Monty. and how this is still affecting him and hurt him. And Monty was very loyal to Kyle, and Monty has given Kyle zero reason to ever doubt his loyalty. So Monty took this as this was not this was not a microaggression, this was straight up aggression. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like,
Mhm.
what about me makes him think that I'm not loyal other than
Mhm.
the color of my skin? Because I have shown time and time again how loyal I am to the pound and to him. Um, and that's what like it is. We did not get to see the conversation. We saw them afterward. Taylor was absolutely crying.
Oh, for
Um,
sure, for sure. I mean, there was a point when she got into the back bedroom and the cameras cut almost immediately because she let out a sob. I know because I heard it, and I was listening for the reaction while I was doing stuff. I heard it, and I was like, "Did she just sob?" And all of a sudden, I hear dun 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 dun, and like the fucking "We'll be right back"
we'll
music
be
comes
right
on, and I'm
back.
like, "God damn it!" Like that was, and I think it was just equal. Not that we want to watch. I don't think it's that I wanted to watch her be sad because I don't. That actually really hurt. But it's more of just like it was out of frustration that they had just they had taken that conversation from us. We will never know the full context of that conversation, and that genuinely bothers me. Genuinely bother unless they talk about it and we can hear it.
Yeah,
Until they can talk about it, we will have no clue because CBS took that not just away from us as viewers, they took it away from them. They took it away from them.
yeah,
And like I understand if you wanted to have like be sensitive about what you're going to show on the show because it's like or at least of like how they're reacting because that's tough, but I just feel like to just rob people of this conversation. I mean,
I mean,
people said it on Twitter, "Stop protecting Kyle," but it was just
it's
it
what
was an
we've been
abysmal
saying this
decision.
whole
Abysmal.
it's what we've been saying this whole episode is that like why? Why are you cutting this? Don't you think Monty and Taylor's voice are the voices we need to hear? I can't hear you.
I turned my mic off. I knew that would be a thing. Sorry. So that's one of the things that so that's how the stop protecting Kyle hashtag came about for the second time this season. Um and that was it trended to number 1 in an hour, guys, because this was barely an hour long conversation. So as soon as people realized, I think it took what 20 minutes for people to flood Twitter saying you're not going to show us this conversation.
Yeah.
Really? They could have jumped in. They had all the time in the world to jump in the conversation. They chose not to. We genuinely got 0% of the conversation. We got to see Alyssa, we got to see Turner, got to see Terrence, which was I think it was good to see what how Terrence reacted honestly cuz that's like I want to like I'm not trying to like be that way, but like I want to know how the POC are thinking first. Like I honestly, it's not that I'm saying like screw the white people, but it's like those are the people I care about most. I want to make sure they're okay. I want to know how they're
They're the ones
feeling.
that matter in this.
Right. Like we are like one of the things they were saying is like we want to tell Turner because we know he has this business that he promotes and we want to make sure he knows. It's like yeah, I get that and like that's one thing, but this is their literal lives. Like their literal lives. It's just and how they're being treated as humans. So that just I'm still not over it. I'm not over that absolutely atrocious decision. I don't know in what mind they thought that was going to fly. Like I just don't know where they thought that we weren't going to lose it and that I think they maybe thought that
It's
it wasn't going
probably
to
the
trend to
same
number
person
1.
that it's probably the same person that stuck house gas in the backyard for 7 days and thought we weren't gonna wall yell.
Well, whoever that person is, I know I said that we need to have a change. That person needs to be out. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Grodner. I don't care who the fuck that person is. That person needs to go. Because it's just the decision making is absolutely
I
disgusting.
mean, I'll tell you one
Disgusting.
thing, I put every single dime to my name on that they're fucking white.
Oh! Oh, for sure. And they have a lot of white yes men probably around them going like, "Yeah, totally makes sense." And whether it's because they agree or because they don't want to deal with the power structure, that's on them. If there's a power structure problem within production, then CBS needs to address that. I'm not saying that is a case, but I really wouldn't be surprised if that's the case in general because I mean, we can't imagine this is going smoothly behind the scenes, right? Like no way. So anyways, so next up is Michael and Brittany talking to Alyssa. Alyssa does not make excuses when she finds out. She's like, "Oh no. Oh no, no, no. I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't want to be a part of that. I
But
didn't
this is
think
what
that
I
was a
was going
part
to
of
ask
that."
earlier
Mhm.
is, do we think that when Kyle, we've seen the conversation where Kyle brought this up with Alyssa. Do you
Yes.
think that she just didn't pick up what he was saying? Like she
So, I genuinely am going to say yes, and I don't mean this to be defending her
no.
or to dig at her, but it's going to be possibly both. I don't think she was smart enough to. And I don't mean this in a mean way. Like the conversations where she's like, Newark is the happiest country in the world. And it's like, okay, just so off. And then the conversation we saw the other night where her and Kyle are talking about the amazing race countries they'll visit, and they are destroying everything they know where
I
absolutely
think
nothing
if I
is.
cuz I in prep for this, I wanted to make sure we had exact quotes. What he told Alyssa could, well, first of all, she's probably, still trying to come down for the 10 seconds that she got. But like, I don't think that she was fully hearing him or even maybe not even really paying attention. Um, because it I've seen her act, and I use that word
Oh yeah.
very lightly, but I've seen her try to sell something and she's terrible at it. And her reaction to hearing this information was genuine. The fact that she left the room, she didn't speak on it, she didn't say anything. And then for the longest time, it wasn't until till Michael and Brittany were having their conversation with Turner that you said it when your TikTok videos, kind of like how it all played out with Terrence slipping
It
up to
was
Kyle,
simultaneous. Oh man,
all
I
of
mean,
that. When he went to Alyssa's, like, "What is going on?" She was trying to not give him the time of day. She was pretending to nap. She was just like, "I don't know. No, just the
yup.
stuff. No." And she just kept denying it. And he's like, "Alyssa, what is going on? Was it about me in an all white alliance?" Like, he
But
like flat
that's
out had like,
But
"I know,
that's
bitch."
the tell. But that's the tell. So I want to get to that very. We are gonna let's just get right into that
Yeah.
conversation. Let me give people a very brief background, and then we will jump right back
Yeah.
into that. So, Michael and after the conversation with Alyssa, as Sarah has mentioned, Sarah's like Alyssa leaves the room. She's like, "Oh, I don't know how I feel." Genuinely doesn't say anything. Like people say, "Oh, she didn't really have an opportunity to say anything." She did. It was in front of other people, but she had an opportunity.
No,
They quite
there wasn't
literally
just
like
that. There
pulled
was before
her.
all before this with Alyssa. If we're just following the Alyssa aftermath, she went to the HOH room. There was Terrence, Kyle, Turner, and Alyssa. They were asking what they were talking about. She was talking
Literally.
about the leftover stuff. She left out all the Kyle stuff, right? She didn't
Mhm.
say anything about that. Then I think like everybody just about left. Anyway, we see her later in the bedroom with Kyle, and I don't even know what he's talking. I don't even remember what he's talking to her about
I
because I
don't
was
either.
focused on her face where she's just looking at him like, "You motherfucker just ruined my life." Like
No, no,
the
seriously, because
stars
she's
were
also like, "What did I
completely
get
out of her eyes.
into?" Yes, you sent me that text almost word for word that the stars were out of her eyes.
She
Like,
was holding her coffee cup so that he couldn't touch her hands. Like she scooted back on the bed. Oh, he goes, "Can we like lay down and talk?" She goes, "We could sit."
it's the body language. I was talking about it when
Yeah.
we were live during when we were watching Turner's conversation because like Turner's body language was very telling. He was freaking out because he basically went into fetal position with his feet on the table, and I was like, "Oh dear lord, this is not
Yeah.
going well."
Yeah.
So to speak of that conversation, so right almost immediately after, not directly, but within minutes of ending that conversation with Alyssa, Michael starts the conversation with Turner. Brittany eventually joins. Um, and at the same time, we'll get to Turner's full comments in a little bit because we're going to talk about what he thinks. But at the same time, Monty is now telling Terrence what he heard from Michael and Brittany earlier. So these two conversations are genuinely happening simultaneously. I don't know how we handled the feeds. I don't. That was a blur.
It
I
was a
don't
lot.
even know. So this is where it gets messy.
But he's like
So
telling him out in the kitchen.
yeah, no, right, and it's just like, well, so at one point, while Monty's talking to Terrence about this, Monty's battery pack dies in the middle of the conversation. So production is bugging the ever living shit out of him to go change his battery pack so we can get the full context and have all the full quotes. So he's like, I'll be right back, man. And at this point, Kyle had actually just entered the room, I think just to like get something or just like check in and see what was up. And so as Monty's leaving, Terrence goes like, yo, like, come here. And he's just like, I just wanted to let you know. I think Monty was just telling me that Michael and Brittany had some sort of like all white alliance they were trying to get into. And that is the moment because the vibe changed. And
I think
it was
Kyle
his
heard
reaction
that.
that told what that he knew he was outed and that he knew he had an all white alliance
Yeah,
because of his
but
reaction.
Terrence misheard it.
Yep.
Kyle knew immediately when Terrence said it that Terrence misheard it, and he ran out, like literally sprinted out of
Sprinted.
the room. And he was like, "What? Let me go. I'm gonna go find out what's going." And then he leaves the room, and then Monty walks in, and then when Monty walks in, he said, "All right, dude." Like Terrence says, "Like finish what you're telling me." He's like, "Oh, so Brittany and Michael, they're kind of telling everybody now. Like they sat us down, they talked that Kyle was trying to start all white lights." And Terrence, Kyle, oh,
Oh, the look on his face. He literally goes,
and then he just like leans back in his bed, like, "Yeah, I fucked up. I'm not gonna fix that though." Like,
no, like quite literally. I don't think those words came out of his mouth, but like
no.
pretty much that
But
was his
he just went
reaction.
silent about the whole thing. So then cut to we see Kyle waking up Alyssa.
Well, actually, he runs up to the HOH room first.
Oh, that's
He goes
right.
up because he goes up to the HOH room. So after Monty, he finds this out after as Monty's coming back in and he's leaving. He sees Alyssa sleeping. I think he genuinely wanted to talk to her first, but saw that she was curled up and he's like, okay, I'll just talk to Turner first then. Goes up to the HOH room, and who is still in the HOH room but Michael and Brittany? And that conversation has not ended yet.
Yep.
That conversation is still going on. So he goes up there, rings the doorbell. Turner just goes, pretty much just says, go away. Like, not
I
right
mean, he
now.
was nice. So he's like, give
No, he
us a couple
was.
more
He's
minutes.
like, yeah, he was like, can you give us a minute? And Kyle saw who was in there and he pooped himself.
Yep.
Runs right back downstairs to Alyssa and is prodding her for information at this point. I think it took maybe 2.5 minutes. And she was
Because
just like,
she was just like acting like she was half asleep and I don't know. And then she goes, "It's not really my place to say." And he's like, "Alyssa, this is my life." And then he got the whiny voice that he does with her when he's trying to like manipulate her into something.
every time.
And then he's just like, "But this is my life." Like, did he say I have a white alliance? Like,
And then she pretty much confirms it. She goes, yeah, Brittany and Michael are talking about that kind of stuff. And he looks her dead in the face and says, this is going to, do you have the full quote? I know he was like, this is going to ruin my life.
yeah. He said, "This
I
is
might have
not
to
worth
leave the game.
I have to leave the game. This is not worth 750K.
Yes.
This is my life." What I find very telling for him is that he did not run to the HOH room to defend himself or to say this wasn't true or to say any of those things. He ran upstairs to the DR to get in to talk to production. They told him no. Then he ran down to the downstairs to ask to be in that DR. And like said, "I need to talk to somebody now," because they did the whole like the DR is closed, blah blah blah. The diary
We
room is
need to
closed.
talk to somebody like immediately.
He said, "I need to talk to somebody immediately." They let him into the DR, and then a few seconds later, Taylor comes out of the storage room with a bag of Lay's
With Lays.
with the
It's the
Lay's.
juxtaposition for me. So yeah, so he's in a full blown panic at this point. At this point, um, and eventually feeds go down for several hours. But I want to return very not briefly because we do need to have a an important conversation about how Turner received this, because Turner had his reaction
I've
warrants
watched
a conversation.
right, and you and I should probably discuss before, but, like, I've
Oh
watched
yeah.
that conversation 3 times. I think and the more I watch it, the more I truly believe Turner is are they being for real? Is
Yeah.
this a game move?
Hmm.
Are they lying? Is this really what they wanna lie about?
Agreed.
Like, he I think that he didn't want to participate in the conversation, not because it wasn't important, but because it came off like it was a game move, and he, like, was trying to process, like, "Do they really have the odd?" Because he keeps saying it afterward. He kept saying afterward, like,
Oh yeah.
"Yeah, they wouldn't lie about." No, there's no way. There's no way they would lie about something like that, the outside ramifications of that, because it was like he was trying to convince himself.
Let me read, actually, since I have it in front of me, the full transcript of, and I transcribed it on Twitter for you guys. So follow me at It's Abigail Adams if you don't. But so this is the full transcript of what he said as he's processing these emotions. I want to, before we even start this, remind anybody who didn't hear this part of the earlier conversation, or if you forgot, that Sarah and I have talked about how we have a different perception of how fast someone comes to terms with this kind of information versus someone who is a person of color, where for them it is one of the it's almost
Yeah.
instant, if not instant. Whereas not even just with Turner, like we're about to talk about Turner, but as we saw with Michael and Brittany, they even took time to process and be like, is this what we
I
think
think
it
Turner's
is?
reaction would have been a lot more immediate had Monty told him this
For sure.
and
For
not Michael and
sure.
Brittany.
So here is the full context, and then we will dive right into this because we do want to talk a lot about this. So, quote, and hopefully I don't miss anything. So my head is literally spinning right now. I have no idea what to think. I could have never thought that someone would convince me that Kyle might not be best for my game. But that's what Michael does. He just convinces people of things like that. I don't know. I have no idea what to think anymore. I feel like Kyle might end up on the block this week now. Taylor's still my target, but like, damn. They are good at this game, they being Michael and Brittany, because I have been convinced. And I don't think, knowing they're on TV, they would say Kyle was specifically pitching an all white alliance with the intention of it being an all white alliance to be the opposite of a cookout, knowing there are cameras around. You don't just say that unless you want to be friggin' canceled up the ass. So I don't think that was actually a lie. Because if they said that and it wasn't true, they were pitching someone said an all white alliance. You just don't do that. That's not something that you just do. So it kind of freaks me out that if Kyle was pitching that my name was involved, what the hell are you? I don't want any part in that. Ugh, this gives me the ick, as Alyssa would say. Huge ick. I hate this. My God. Taylor is still worse for my game, even with that alliance in Kyle's mouth. Taylor's still worse for my game. I want Taylor to go home, but I still might put Kyle up so that I can be good with them and see what I've done. Now I would need a reason for Kyle to go up on the block. My word. Now this was just there's so much to unpack from that. I know.
Now
But
that
this
was
is an
wait.
immediate reaction without even talking to Monty,
Yeah.
Alyssa, literally even Kyle himself. So that is the
I
straight
really
reaction.
think part of him thought that this was a game move and
I
it
think so
wasn't
too.
true.
And I think this cam talk was because he literally asked for the cam. It wasn't like the cam was just there. He's like, I'll talk. He said, I'm going to need a camera. I need to work
Yeah.
some things out. I think he was, because I mean, you've heard me talk out things on here and be like, oop, I'm dumb. My bad.
Yeah.
Different podcasts, not this one. But like, I think that was kind of what was happening where he was kind of talking it out. Maybe probably wasn't the best timing
Again,
to talk things.
we are not
He
making
also got the
excuses.
inside. Nope.
Every
No,
single
no, no,
person
no.
in this house, all the white people in this house fucked up.
Yep. All of them.
So, we're not making excuses. I'm not trying to sound like
Mm-mm.
we're making excuses. We're talking
Absolutely
about like the
not.
level of like where we're trying to like relate to where each person's coming from and where that will help us better determine where they can grow from this.
Yeah, like I said right before reading the quote, it's kind of about like our perception as white women as white people versus what POC see and how they are perceiving this situation. And so, I mean, this is just, you can literally see his actual thought process in motion here. I think this was a thought process that a lot of people who are checking their biases right now were having with themselves, genuinely. And it's not about like, because Turner said like, oh, she's bad for my game. That's a little different because like it's not about people feeling that Taylor's bad for their personal lives, but about how they feel that they are for his game at the same time. So um it's incredibly important context to have, because I know I've been out here saying like Turner's doing the right thing by putting him up, and then people misconstrued what I was saying. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, because I could have worded, put more phrasing in there to clarify I was only saying that he was getting Kyle put on the block, and that I wasn't trying to be like, oh, he's acting like some white savior. And I mean, the phrase white savior has come out of Turner's mouth when he's discussing this, which I did not really like, because he was like, look, like I cannot, I really, I actually, that just, I wish I had pulled that, because that just jumped in my head as we're discussing this now. But he was talking about just like, I'm not trying to be some white savior, but oh, it was about saving Taylor with the bullying situation.
Hmm.
And it was just kind of like I understand that you're not trying to, but even just by saying that, and in the context of this situation, it's not something that needs to be brought up right now.
Right.
Because like it was about defending whether or not he puts Kyle on the block, because he had said he was going to do it, but it was still trying to process these emotions, because he had literally just formed a final two with him. So that was the mess. That was the beginning of the mess. Um, so there are some important things. So that was the important stuff to talk about with Turner. Promises to put Kyle on the block, just kind of running through my notes with this. And after this, we really get the feeds down for like most of the night. I mean, the
I
feeds
mean,
came back, but
other things have happened, but we're still trying to piece together like information for today. With the feeds are cutting away a lot,
and I have
so hopefully
notes
we have a better picture of that by next episode.
for sure. And we
Um,
will make sure we'll like explicitly tell you guys what has changed between what I'm about to tell you guys, what we think we know, versus what we find out for the next episode. Because we want to
right.
make very clear, like, this is all alleged, what I'm about to say, versus what we will find out, hopefully, from the episodes. So when the feeds went down, there was allegedly a house meeting. I'm not sure how formal it was, like if someone called a house meeting or if it was just conversation happened and people started joining in and it became a house meeting setting.
The bits that I heard that it was Kyle that called a house meeting
I
to
think so
apologize.
too. I do think that was the case. Um, but during this, uh, it from what I got, it was I apologize, but.
Yes.
And I'm going to say before we even start with the allegations, that's just already problem number one, because that's just like social skills 101 is you don't do that. So in this, he then not only exposes, because the leftovers are exposed at this point, everybody knows. Not only are the leftovers exposed at this point, though, the after party and Turner's final two with Kyle just get blown out in the open. We don't know all of the context around this as well, but Terrence also actually blew up, allegedly, and maybe I should rephrase that, because I don't know if he even raised his voice, but he got angry, and he was seemingly calling out um, Michael and Taylor, excuse me, not Michael and Taylor, Michael and Brittany, for the timing of how these comments came about, because these comments, as we've mentioned before, came 3 weeks after they were initially made. And yes, there was time to process and some more comments were made, but it doesn't matter. They waited at minimum 2 weeks to say anything. Even if they were going to take time to process, he was, from what we could gather, upset with that. There is a quote, two quotes that I want to read from Michael and Brittany from this morning regarding that. And Cam's cutaway, surprise, surprise, in the middle of this conversation. And Brittany started by saying, "The house is mad at Kyle, but they're also not happy with me and the timing." And then Michael said, "Terrence made the comment that lumps us in with what Kyle did." So we can at least infer that that's what happened. But Terrence later went on to actually, yeah, that same morning was talking to Turner about the situation. Turner's like, "Oh my god, can't believe my game got blown up last night. Like, this is insane." And Terrence was apologizing for, and I'm using his own words, for being aggressive last night during the meeting. And Turner was like, "No, no, no, don't apologize. That's you said what you needed to say. You did what you had to do." And that was, I believe, regarding this same comment regarding whether or not they use this move for game purposes. Also, want to make it clear that Monty today, as well, today being Monday, has also made similar comments regarding what Terrence allegedly said, and has very much stood behind it. Like, speaking with Turner, saying that it still doesn't sit right with him that Michael and Brittany waited so long to come forward with this information at all.
Right.
Um, so that's really, so we're still trying to get some context with that house meeting, but that is pretty much the nitty gritty, and then some of the fallout that we have really used to piece that together of what actually happened when I think the feeds were down for like 5 or 6 hours. I know there was a small gap in between where they came back for like 45 minutes and then they went right back down again. Um, so yeah, so Turner is upset that Kyle blew up his game. At the end, not the end of the day, in the middle of the day rather, Kyle ended up going on the block because Michael used the veto to save Brittany, and now we are in I'm not even going to beat around the bush. We're in an uncomfortable position still,
Mhm.
because what we are looking at right now is this situation: Kyle versus Taylor, a black woman versus a white man who proposed an all-white alliance.
I mean, honestly, it is looking
Oh
like Kyle is
boy.
going home, and
Right, right.
Terrence is still convinced Taylor's worse for his game. I don't know what he has against Taylor, to be
That still
honest.
drives me nuts. It
There
makes me mad.
but he's the one, but as of like still recording this podcast, Monty is talking with Turner